In 1965, California resident Sid Patrick was taking a late-night stroll on the beach. Unable to sleep from insomnia, Sid hoped stretching his legs would finally allow him to get that elusive sleep his body desired. At home, not far away, his wife and 3 children soundly slept. As Sid was walking down the beach, he would suddenly hear a whistling sound in the sky. He looked up, and he was shocked to see the object was not a low-flying plane, but something he had never seen before. In this episode, we will examine the alien abduction of Sid Patrick, as well as his meeting with the United States Air Force. On January 30th, 1965, around 2 a.m., Sid Patrick was walking on Manresa Beach near Watsonville, California, when his life would change forever. As Sid looked up in the sky, during his walk, he saw an object of which he had never seen before. The craft up in the sky was disc-shaped, around 50 feet in diameter, and hovering around 30 feet off the ground. It began descending, coming closer to Sid, and eventually hovered just a few feet off the ground. A frightened Sid began rushing back toward his home, which was around 1,500 feet away. As he started trying to climb the sand dunes, he heard a strange voice call for him. It said, "Do not be frightened," and they were not hostile. Sid kept hustling away, and the voice persisted, stating their peaceful intentions. Eventually, Sid turned around, and the voice invited him on the ship. Sid carefully walked toward the ship, and as he got closer, a door materialized. He stepped in slowly, and a bright light shone upon him. Sid was greeted by a being that looked human in appearance. The being introduced himself as Zeno. He was around 5'10", wearing a light blue skin type suit. Zeno would then ask Sid what questions he had for it. He was scared at first, but eventually asked why they were here. Zeno stated it was for observation. Sid later speculated, though, that the beings weren't here to observe us, but actually wanted to see how Sid observed them. During the entire trip, there would be almost no questions to Sid, and it was as if they knew everything. Sid asked how they traveled so fast, and Zeno informed him their speed was determined by their energy source. It was an answer that Sid didn't quite understand. Sid would also ask how they could avoid radar detection. Zeno informed him that they were able to avoid radar as their spacecraft absorbed energy and would not allow a reflection or harmful penetration. Sid inquired if he was human. According to Zeno, the beings were human, but a different type of human than us. Zeno would go on to tell Sid he was the first person to ever enter the craft. They had invited others, but they had declined to come on board. Zeno then proceeded to guide Sid throughout the ship. They went room to room, and there were 14 other rooms, which had pale blue walls and were all oval in shape. There was light that seemed to be coming from the walls and the ceiling as well. Sid would see 8 other beings as he toured the ship. All were men, except one looked female. The beings were around 150 to 155 pounds, around 5'10", and appeared young, around the ages of 20 to 25. They wore light blue suits and appeared human, although there were differences between them and us. Their chins were more pointed than a normal human, as well as their nose. The men had dark brown, short and wavy hair, and the women had long hair that was dark brown as well. Overall, Sid described them as being very clean-cut. Most of the crew appeared to be busy at their stations, navigating the ship, while Zeno spoke with Sid. They didn't pay much attention to him. Zeno would lead Sid around the craft educating him. Zeno informed him that the beings were from a planet behind the sun. He then showed Sid a 3D image of their mothership out in space. Sid noted it was massive, maybe a mile long, shaped like a cigar and surrounded by a cloud. Zeno said it supplied the power to their craft. The craft was traveling during the tour, and Zeno informed Sid they had stopped and asked him to step out. Sid stepped outside, and he wasn't near his home, but in an abandoned campsite for trailers. Zeno wanted Sid to remember this spot so he didn't think later on he was dreaming. Sid would step out and touch the craft. The ship was very smooth and felt like plexiglass. Still, it was like nothing he had ever felt before. Later on, Sid would locate the landing site and discover that it was near Leggett, California, which is about 175 miles from his home. Zeno would tell Sid more about his planet as well. There was no crime and no sickness. Life expectancy was very long, and the beings didn't use money. They lived as one in a utopian society. Sid then re-entered the craft, and the two went into what was known as the consultation room. There, Zeno told Sid about the Supreme Being and said that the beings consulted. The Supreme Being was their God. Sid seemed to get coerced into praying toward the God by Zeno. As he kneeled and prayed, he said he was overcome with emotions of joy and happiness. It was a euphoria that he never felt before. It was so intense he had to rest afterwards in a chair for some time. Around 4 a.m., Sid was returned to his home. Unlike many other alien abductees, Sid didn't appear to become traumatized by the event. In fact, he wanted answers and would call the U.S. Air Force the day he came home. After his call, he would meet for a debrief. For 3 hours, a team headed by Major Damon Reeder from Hamilton Air Force Base drilled him with questions. They told Sid the beings were dangerous and hostile and that he should have ran. Interestingly, they cited several cases where UFOs had attacked aircraft and killed pilots. One of the cases they mentioned, the Thomas Mantell incident, we covered on a prior episode on this channel. The Air Force would continue telling Sid there were different races of aliens visiting the Earth and that he should refrain from telling his story. In the years that followed, according to Sid, he continued to have contact with Zeno. On one occasion, when Sid went to Seattle to give a speech, Zeno sent him flowers. It's not clear to what extent Sid had contact with them, but the one thing clear is he had a positive experience. In fact, it's probably more accurate to label him an experiencer and not an abductee. Experiencers are different than alien abductees in that they were happy about their abduction and many times would do it again. Some believe that these individuals are brainwashed and the beings have planted thoughts in their minds. Others think it's a case of Stockholm Syndrome. It's important to point out there appears to be different types of aliens visiting the planet. Some appear to be benevolent, while others not so much. The case of Sid Patrick is surely a fascinating one and seems pretty valid. Perhaps the most valid reason for this is that later on, Sid was able to find the landing site for the UFO. This was a place he had never been to before. In addition, since he wasn't taken while sleeping, it seems highly unlikely that he imagined the event. It could be the case he made up the whole story, but it seems unlikely. This is because in 1965, making a report like this is just inviting trouble into your life. The military was not happy with him, and a report like this would certainly lead to being outcast in society. In addition, UFO investigators like Timothy Cook, who studied the case and listened to his audio recordings, noted how precise, consistent, and quick his answers were with investigators. There was no waffling or hesitation in his answers. Sid Patrick eventually retreated from the spotlight due to the constant harassment, yet his case continues to be studied and analyzed to date.